I knew something was wrong the moment the cranberry sauce started to cool on the edge of the plate. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but when you've been married long enough, you start noticing the small betrayals first. The little pauses, the unfinished texts, the sudden busy days that don't add up. So when I pulled the turkey out of the oven, golden and steaming, and realized my wife still hadn't come home, the quiet of the house didn't just feel empty. It felt staged. She had promised she'd be home early. "Just a half day," she'd said that morning, kissing me quickly on the cheek as if her lips were already somewhere else. I spent the afternoon preparing everything the way she liked it. Garlic mashed potatoes, her favorite herb stuffing, the wine she claimed made her feel warm, but not dizzy. I even set out the cloth napkins we never used unless we had company. Pathetic, maybe, but I wanted this Thanksgiving to feel like ours again. By 5 o'clock, her seat was still untouched. By 6, the candles had burned halfway down, casting melting shadows across the table like the room itself was tired of waiting. I checked my phone every 5 minutes until the motion became mechanical. Nothing. No call, no update. Just silence. At 6:30, I finally broke and called her. Straight to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text appeared. Just one line, almost insultingly vague. "Helping a friend. Don't wait up. Love you. Helping a friend. On Thanksgiving, while our dinner sat untouched and cooling on the table." I remember staring at the message so long my eyes began to sting. I should have felt anger, but what I felt was something heavier, like a slow, sinking dread. That was the moment the lies started feeling practiced. I tried eating alone, but every bite tasted like cardboard. Eventually, I set down the fork and walked to the window, more out of restlessness than suspicion. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, most homes dark except for the soft glow of family gatherings behind their curtains. But then I noticed something strange. The house next door, Rick's house, was lit up like a holiday commercial. Cars lined his driveway. Laughter drifted faintly across the yards. He wasn't the social type. He usually spent holidays with his daughter when she came home from college. Yet this looked like a full party. And through the kitchen window, just barely, I saw a silhouette. A woman's silhouette. At first, I told myself it could be anyone. A family friend. A cousin. Someone I'd never met. Someone who didn't have my wife's hair pulled into the same loose bun she wore when she cooked. Someone who didn't move with that same familiar curve of the shoulders. But then the figure leaned over the counter, tossing her head back in a laugh I could almost hear, and I felt something inside me ice over. It was her. My wife. My Thanksgiving-promised, text-lying wife, was in our neighbor's kitchen, at his gathering, on the holiday she was supposed to spend with me. I stood there frozen, my hand gripping the windowsill so tightly my knuckles whitened. I tried to come up with excuses for her. Maybe she really was helping a friend and ended up here somehow. Maybe Rick invited her last minute. Maybe she was dropping something off. People make mistakes. People misunderstand. But the longer I watched, the clearer it became. She wasn't dropping anything off. She wasn't helping anyone. She was settled there, comfortable, smiling, moving around the kitchen like she belonged in his home more than in mine. I forced myself to look away, but even when I turned from the window, her silhouette burned inside my mind like a cruel afterimage. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was realizing she had chosen someone else's Thanksgiving over ours, chosen someone else's table, someone else's company, someone else's smile. And as the hours crawled by and the house grew colder and quieter, her empty seat at my table seemed to mock me. It whispered the truth before I had the courage to say it out loud. Something had started long before tonight. Something I had been too blind or too trusting to see. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with the TV still glowing faintly in the dark. I don't even remember turning it on. I must have done it out of instinct, the way people light candles in old churches, not because they expect anything to change, but because silence feels too heavy to sit with alone. My wife still hadn't come home. Her side of the bed was untouched, the sheets lying flat and cold. I stood in the kitchen staring at the mess from last night's dinner, plates still set, turkey untouched, 2 wine glasses, one filled, one empty. I didn't clean any of it. I just walked outside because the air in the house felt suffocating, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting for me to admit what I saw. The cold hit me instantly, sharp enough to wake me up fully. Frost glittered on the grass, the kind that cracks under your shoes. I stood in the yard, trying to decide if I should confront her now or wait until she came home pretending nothing happened. Maybe I would have stayed there longer if I hadn't heard a soft voice behind me. Rough morning? I turned to see Emily walking toward me from her dad's driveway. She was bundled in a thick sweater, hair messy from sleep, hands buried in her sleeves. She always had that gentle presence, calm, observant, like she saw more than she let on. I'd known her since she was a kid, but she wasn't a kid anymore. She carried herself like she'd grown up fast, the kind of fast that leaves a particular sadness in someone's eyes. I forced a small smile. Something like that. She studied me for a moment, tilting her head. Yeah, you look like you slept about 10 minutes. Thanks, I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. That's generous. She laughed lightly, but her expression shifted as she glanced back at her dad's house. Her brows pulled together in a way I'd seen maybe once before, when her parents were arguing years ago. He's been acting weird lately, she said quietly. Weird even for him. I tried to keep my face neutral, but her words hit me like a slow, cold wave. Weird how? She sighed and wrapped her arms around herself. Sneaking around, whispering on the phone, smiling at texts like he's in high school again. She rolled her eyes. I swear, if he's dating someone, I don't know whether to be happy for him or disgusted. My throat tightened. I didn't want to encourage her suspicion, but I also didn't trust myself to lie. Maybe he just met someone, I said carefully. Emily shrugged. Maybe, but he's being secretive, and he keeps disappearing at random times. She paused, studying me again. Do you know anything about it? That question hung between us, heavy and too close to the truth. I shook my head slowly. No, I don't know anything. It wasn't technically a lie. I didn't know details, just enough to feel sick. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Well, if you hear something, or if he tells you something, would you let me know? I don't like being kept in the dark in my own house. I nodded, but my mind was a storm. I wondered what she would think if she knew who her father's secret involved. I wondered how she'd look at me if I told her my wife had spent Thanksgiving in his kitchen. I wondered if she would believe me, or if I even wanted her to. Before either of us could say anything else, her dad's front door opened. Rick stepped outside, stretching like he hadn't just spent the previous night stabbing me in the back. He spotted us and waved with that irritatingly casual grin. "Morning," he called out, like I hadn't watched him through his kitchen window last night with my wife at his side. Emily's posture stiffened. She didn't wave back. Rick walked toward his car, keys jangling. "Emily, I'm heading out to pick up some things. You want anything?" "No," she answered flatly. She didn't even look at him. His attention shifted to me. "You all right? You look like hell." I forced a laugh. "Just a long night." "Yeah," he said, smirking faintly. "I bet." Emily noticed. I could see it in the way her eyes narrowed. When he finally drove off, she exhaled hard. "See what I mean? He's hiding something, and he's terrible at it." I didn't trust myself to say anything without letting too much spill out, so I just nodded and stuffed my hands into my pockets. Emily lingered a moment longer, looking like she wanted to ask something else, but didn't. Instead, she offered me a small, warm smile that contrasted painfully with everything swirling inside my chest. "If you ever need anything," she said quietly, "I'm around." Then she walked back to her house, leaving me alone in the cold with the truth scraping at my ribs. And for the first time, I wondered if she had any idea her father's secrets were about to collide with mine. I told myself I wouldn't start digging, that I'd wait for her to walk through the door and give me some explanation. Any explanation. that would make last night make sense. But by the time afternoon sunlight crept across the living room floor and she still hadn't come home, something inside me shifted from hurt to suspicion and then into something colder. A kind of clarity I didn't want but couldn't avoid. Her purse was missing, her favorite necklace gone. The sweater she always wore on chilly evenings also nowhere to be found. I checked the laundry basket, the bathroom, the closet. Nothing. It was like she had prepared an overnight bag and didn't bother hiding it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, feeling ridiculous for even considering what I was about to do. But people don't vanish on Thanksgiving after promising to be home early. They don't ignore calls unless they have something to hide. They don't spend the holiday laughing in another man's kitchen unless they're already halfway gone. So I opened our shared phone account. Her call log wasn't surprising. She had talked to Rick more times than I ever realized. Short calls, long calls, little patterns where she'd call him right after she finished talking to me. But the texts, those hit harder. Not because I could read them, they were deleted, but because the timestamps told their own story. Late nights, early mornings, blocks of time that matched perfectly with the moments she told me she was working late or running errands. Then I checked our joint bank account. Transactions I never noticed before. Lunches at the cafe near Rick's office, charges for a wine shop she never visited with me, and, this one felt like a punch, matching charges made exactly 5 minutes apart at a boutique downtown. She'd told me she bought a scarf that day. I never questioned it. Now I wondered what she bought with him. My hands were shaking by the time I closed the laptop. I didn't want to know more. I already knew too much. But the human mind is cruel. Once suspicion starts, it crawls through every memory, every conversation, until even the innocent moments feel poisoned. I was still sitting there, numb, when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but I recognized the sender the moment I saw the name. Emily. Hey, I got your number from my dad's contact list. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to tell you something. It's about last night. Something messed up happened and I can't stop thinking about it. My stomach tightened. Can we talk privately? Not here. Somewhere neutral. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to hear whatever she had seen. Another part of me, maybe the bigger part, needed to know. Needed someone else to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I typed back, "Where?" Her reply came quickly. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from your place. I can be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. My pulse jumped. I didn't know why she was reaching out, but the tone of her message felt urgent, almost shaken. And beneath the words, I sensed something else, like she was afraid to speak inside her own house. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The cold air bit into my skin immediately, sharper than it had been that morning. I walked quickly, head down, not wanting to risk seeing Rick or my wife anywhere near the neighborhood. Every step felt heavy, like I was marching toward a truth I'd been avoiding for years. The cafe was half empty when I walked in. Soft lights, quiet music, the faint smell of cinnamon and fresh pastries. Emily was already there in a corner booth, stirring a drink she clearly hadn't touched. When she looked up and saw me, her expression softened in a way that made something inside me twist. She wasn't just worried, she was scared. She motioned for me to sit, her voice barely a whisper when she spoke. "Thank you for coming. I know this is weird." I slid into the seat across from her. "It's okay. What happened?" She took a breath, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her fingers trembled slightly, and when her eyes met mine, there was something raw there, something that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "What I saw last night at my dad's house," she said quietly, "wasn't just weird. It was wrong. And I think it involves you." For a moment, everything froze. The cafe sounds fading, the world narrowing to nothing but the look on her face. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I knew it was something I wasn't ready for. Something that would take whatever little hope I still had left and crush it. Emily didn't speak right away. She kept glancing toward the cafe windows as if she expected her father to walk past at any moment. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were tight with something between guilt and fear, and I felt my pulse quicken even though I didn't know why yet. "I wasn't supposed to be home early yesterday," she began, her voice low. "My ride left campus ahead of schedule, so I showed up a couple hours sooner than my dad expected. When I walked inside, he was in the kitchen with someone he didn't want me to see. I felt the air leave my chest in one slow, painful breath. She looked down at her hands. I heard him laughing. Not the normal kind. It was that stupid flirt laugh he used to do when he wanted to impress my mom." She swallowed. "When I turned the corner, he jumped like he'd been caught stealing, and the woman he was with, she kind of froze. I already knew. Every cell in my body knew. But some awful part of me needed to hear her say it out loud, like ripping off a bandage that had grown into the wound. "I think," she whispered, "that the woman was your wife." The world didn't tilt or spin or explode. It just went eerily still, like time itself paused to acknowledge the blow. Emily kept talking, her voice getting softer. She was wearing an apron, my dad's apron, and the way they looked at each other. She shook her head, her throat tightening. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't friendly. They were acting like a couple, a comfortable couple. A burn spread across my chest, not just from betrayal, but from the humiliating certainty that I had been the only one who didn't know. The only one who had been setting a Thanksgiving table while my wife played homemaker in another man's kitchen. Emily looked up suddenly, eyes glistening. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't pretend I didn't see it." I nodded, but it felt mechanical. My mind kept replaying the image from last night, the silhouette I desperately hoped wasn't hers. I didn't need photographic proof. Emily's trembling voice was proof enough, but then she surprised me. "There's more," she said. "When I walked in, they weren't just cooking. They were standing close, really close. And when I cleared my throat, they jumped apart. My dad tried to act normal, but he couldn't even look me in the eye." Her voice thickened. "He told me she was helping with dinner, but he said it the way people say something when they know you don't believe it." She leaned forward slightly, as if the whole room might overhear. They looked guilty and annoyed that I interrupted. There was something painfully intimate about the way she described it. Not sexual, not explicit, but the kind of closeness that only comes from shared secrets. Emily bit her lip, anger flickering through her expression. "This wasn't the first time," she said quietly. "I've seen her there before. Late at night sometimes, when I'd come downstairs for water. I didn't think anything of it then. I thought maybe you two were hanging out with my dad or something." She exhaled shakily. But now it makes sense. The way she said that, softly, regretfully, hit harder than any accusation. I realized then that she wasn't just telling me my wife cheated. She was admitting her father had betrayed her too. In his own way, he had replaced her Thanksgiving with something that shut her out. She looked at me again, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I felt sick watching them. She hesitated, cheeks flushing slightly. "And I felt bad for you. Really bad. You didn't deserve that." There was a moment, just a breath, where her eyes lingered on mine longer than necessary. Not romantic, not flirtatious, but deeply human. A moment of two people sitting in the ruins of someone else's choices. I finally found my voice. "Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy." She shook her head. "No, it felt awful. But pretending I didn't see it would have been worse." Then, more softly, "And you shouldn't go through this alone." Those words did something to me. Something warm and painful at the same time. There was comfort in her presence, a kind of unexpected steadiness that cut through the fog of humiliation clinging to me. She took a slow breath. "Whatever's going on between them, it didn't start last night. I'm sorry." I nodded again, but this time the numbness faded, replaced with something sharper, something determined. Because now that I knew the truth, Pretending wasn't an option anymore. Emily reached out, hesitated, then gently touched my forearm in a way that was more grounding than anything else. "If you need to talk again," she murmured, "I'm here. Really." Her hand slipped back, but the warmth stayed, lingering like a promise. And as I left the cafe with the truth heavy in my chest, I felt the first spark of something new. Not anger, not revenge yet. Clarity. And whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. When I finally walked into the house that evening, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Her perfume lingering in the hallway like a soft, familiar lie. That subtle floral scent used to feel comforting. Now it felt staged, like she'd sprayed it on purpose before disappearing, hoping to mask the truth with nostalgia. Every step deeper into the house made my chest tighten, because everything looked exactly the same while nothing felt the same at all. I found her in the bedroom, sitting casually on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't just shattered our marriage during a holiday meant for gratitude. She didn't even look up at first. She just said, "Hey," in that breezy tone she used when she wanted to avoid real conversation. I stood in the doorway, unsure if my anger or my exhaustion would speak first. "Where were you last night?" She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't even pretend to think. "Helping a friend with something important. I told you." "A friend," I repeated, keeping my voice steady. "Which friend?" She shrugged without looking up from her phone. "You don't know her." Her lie was so smooth it felt rehearsed. I felt something inside me harden, not rage, not grief, just a quiet sort of breaking. The part of me that had been holding on to denial finally cracked. "You weren't with a friend," I said. "You were at Rick's house." That made her look up. For a single fleeting second, panic flashed across her face. Then she forced a laugh, too quick, too sharp. "What? Why would you even say that? Were you spying on me?" "I saw you through the window." Her jaw tightened. "You think every woman with brown hair is me? Seriously? You were wearing the same sweater you left the house in, and the same bun you always wear when you cook." My voice stayed calm, painfully calm. "And you laughed. I recognized it." She crossed her arms, leaning back like she was settling into an argument she believed she could win. "You're being paranoid. You're reading into things." I almost laughed. Instead, I let the silence sit between us, heavy and suffocating. She shifted uncomfortably, tapping her fingers on her arm like she was waiting for me to drop the subject. But I wasn't dropping anything. "Did you sleep there?" I asked quietly. Her eyes flashed. "What the hell kind of question is that? One you should be able to answer." She stood abruptly, her voice rising. "I'm not doing this. I'm not being accused of cheating just because you're insecure or bored or whatever this is." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not violently, but cleanly, like a thread pulled too tight finally tearing loose. I wasn't angry that she cheated. I was angry that she looked me in the eye and treated me like the fool she assumed I'd always be. Angry that she chose lies over even the decency of an honest confession. "I know you were with him," I said, "and I know it wasn't the first time." Her lips parted, but this time no denial came out. Instead, she said, "You're imagining things. You're trying to make drama where there isn't any. You can't control where I go or who I talk to." Gaslighting. Clean, sharp, practiced. She'd done it before. Small things, half-truths, white lies. But now it was full force, bold enough to make me wonder how long she'd been perfecting this skill. I felt strangely calm. "I'm not imagining anything," I said, "and you know it." She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. Not remorse, not guilt, annoyance, as if my pain was inconvenient, as if I was the obstacle, not the betrayed husband standing in front of her. "You're being dramatic," she muttered. "This conversation is exhausting." I stared at her for a long moment, feeling all the years we'd built together collapsing like a structure with the wrong foundation. There was nothing to save here, nothing to fight for. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd burned the ground behind her, so she had a reason not to come back. Good, I said softly. Then I won't keep you. Her brows rose slightly at my tone, steady, cold, not broken the way she expected. She didn't know that a different part of me had awakened, one that didn't want to beg or plead or collapse under the weight of her betrayal. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative or paint herself as the victim. I was going to wait, watch, think. And then I was going to make sure the truth came out in a way she couldn't twist or hide from. That night, as she went to shower, still pretending nothing was wrong, I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the same place I'd waited for her Thanksgiving dinner she never came home for. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I felt clear, cold, but clear. And that clarity whispered something quiet and certain. If she wanted to play games with lies, then I would end them with truth. Not loud, not violent, but with precision. And I already knew exactly who would help me do it. Emily. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed or heartbroken or spiraling. I didn't have the energy left for any of that. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, absorbing the kind of clarity that follows the moment you finally stop lying to yourself. My wife wasn't confused or lost or making a mistake. She was making choices, deliberate ones, and she expected me to stay exactly where she put me, quiet, compliant, blind. But she had no idea that I wasn't blind anymore. Around 11 in the morning, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be her, maybe offering some half-hearted apology she didn't mean. But it wasn't her name on the screen. It was Emily. "Are you home? I need to talk to you. It's important." I told her she could come over, and a few minutes later I heard a soft knock. When I opened the door, the cold wind rushed in behind her. She was wrapped in a thick coat, face slightly flushed from the walk, eyes bright with something that looked a lot like nerves. "Sorry to show up like this," she said, stepping inside. "My dad left earlier and I couldn't stay in that house. Not with everything I know now." She wasn't dramatic about it. She wasn't crying or trembling. But her need for answers, the same need that had gnawed at me, was written all over her posture, the way she held her arms close to her body as if protecting something fragile. I gestured toward the living room. "You're always welcome here. What's going on?" She sank into the armchair across from me, exhaling slowly. "I've been thinking since yesterday, about what I saw, about what I told you." Her voice wavered, but she steadied it. "I want to confront him. I really do. But I know how he is. He'll twist everything, make me feel crazy, pretend I misinterpreted everything. Gaslighting didn't appear out of nowhere. It ran in families." I nodded. "I know exactly what that feels like." Her eyes softened, and some invisible tension between us pulled taut again. An understanding, a shared betrayal we never asked for. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything inappropriate. It was simply two people sitting in the fallout of someone else's selfishness. "I need proof," she said. "Something he can't talk his way around. Something undeniable." A quiet beat followed before she added, "And I want to help you get yours too." For the first time in 2 days, I felt something other than anger or numbness. I felt possibility. I leaned forward. "If we do this, we need to be smart, careful. No shouting matches, no accusations without evidence. We gather what we need, and when the time is right, we reveal it publicly. No room for excuses." She breathed out, almost relieved. "Exactly. That's why I came. I knew you'd understand." She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she looked down at her hands. "I know his habits, his routines, where he hides things. He's predictable, even when he thinks he's clever." The implication hit me slowly. "You're saying," I said, "that you can help me get into the house." Emily met my gaze with a steady certainty that surprised me. "Yes, when he's gone. He keeps everything on his tablet, photos, texts, everything. He thinks locking it in the desk drawer makes him some kind of genius. She scoffed softly. I know where the backup key is. A plan, simple, clean, effective, started forming in the space between us. Not born from revenge, at least not entirely, but from a shared need to stop being lied to. You're sure about this? I asked. You don't owe me anything. No, she said firmly, but he owes me the truth, and he owes you even more. There was a fire in her expression I hadn't seen before, a confidence that looked good on her, like she was stepping into a version of herself she'd been afraid to become. It made something warm flicker low in my stomach. Not desire, not attraction, just admiration, respect, human connection born from shared wounds. She looked around the room then, her eyes falling on the remnants of the untouched Thanksgiving dinner still sitting boxed on the counter. Her voice softened. You didn't deserve what she did. No one deserves to spend a holiday waiting alone. I'm done waiting, I said, and I meant it. Emily straightened in her seat, and the air between us shifted again, charged, not romantic, but decisive. Then you and I are going to end this, together. She stood, pulling her coat around her, determination sharp in her posture. He'll be out tomorrow afternoon for a meeting. I'll text you the moment he leaves. We'll get whatever he's hiding. As she walked to the door, she paused, close enough for me to notice the faint scent of vanilla and cold air clinging to her coat. She looked up at me, eyes searching mine for one last confirmation. Are you ready? She asked quietly. I didn't hesitate. Yes, more than ever. She nodded once, a small but meaningful acknowledgement, then stepped out into the cold. I watched her cross the yard, her figure sharp against the gray sky, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about exposing a cheating spouse or a deceitful father. This was about reclaiming something both of us had lost without noticing, the power to decide the ending of our own stories. And tomorrow, we'd begin writing it. Emily's text came the next day, at exactly 2:14 p.m. He just left. Meeting downtown. You can come now. There was something sharp and electric in those words. Not excitement exactly, but purpose. Finality. The moment everything would stop being guesswork and start being truth. I grabbed my jacket, locked the door behind me, and crossed the yard with a steadiness that surprised me. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't second-guessing. I felt like I had already stepped past the point where fear mattered. Emily opened the door before I even knocked. She pulled me inside quickly, closing it behind us as if she expected her father to return at any moment. Her eyes were alert, her expression tight with focus. But there was something else there too, relief that she wasn't doing this alone. Come on, she whispered, motioning for me to follow her down the hallway. His office is in the back. I'd been in the house before years ago, but walking through it now felt different, like stepping into enemy territory. The framed photos on the walls, the neat bookshelves, the faint scent of aftershave. It all felt like a stage set for the kind of man who hid his worst secrets beneath polite smiles. Emily led me to a small office at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. Sunlight filtered in from the window, illuminating the mahogany desk where his tablet sat locked in a drawer. She reached behind a row of books on the shelf and pulled out a small silver key. He thinks I don't know about this, she muttered, but he forgets I grew up here. She handed me the key, her fingers brushing mine for a brief second. It wasn't romantic. It was grounding. Like two soldiers pausing before crossing a line they couldn't uncross. I unlocked the drawer. The tablet lay inside, screen dark. I lifted it out, and Emily hovered close enough that I could feel her breath on my shoulder. She typed in the passcode with quiet certainty. He's been using the same password for years, she said softly. He never changes anything unless he's forced to. The screen lit up, and there it was. A gallery folder labeled Holidays. My stomach twisted as I tapped it open. The photos loaded one by one, bright, cheerful, wholesome at first. But then, nestled in the middle of the dozens of shots, were the ones that made my blood turn cold. My wife in Rick's kitchen, smiling, laughing, leaning against the counter while he stood behind her with his hand on the small of her back, as if he had the right to touch her that way. Another photo showed them preparing food together, my wife slicing vegetables while Rick stood so close he might as well have been breathing against her neck. They weren't kissing. They weren't touching in an overtly sexual way. But the intimacy was unmistakable. The ease, the closeness, the way she looked at him like she used to look at me years ago. Emily let out a quiet, shaky breath beside me. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew they were lying." But it wasn't the photos alone that twisted the knife deeper. It was the video file at the bottom of the folder, a little thumbnail marked with yesterday's date. My finger hovered over it. "You don't have to watch it," Emily murmured. "I can just delete it." "No," I said, my voice low. "I need to know." I tapped the file. The video opened with my wife's laugh, warm, familiar, painfully recognizable. There she was, stirring something on the stove while Rick filmed her from behind. She turned, swatting playfully at the camera, her cheeks flushed with more than just cooking heat. At one point she said, "Stop, someone might see," but she said it with a smile that betrayed the truth. Rick chuckled. "No one's coming home," he said. "We've got the whole evening to ourselves." The murder wasn't in the words. It was in her silence, her comfortable silence, the way she didn't protest, the way she didn't correct him, the way she leaned back against the counter, letting him come closer. I stopped the video before it could continue. Emily's hand touched my arm again, gentle, hesitant, careful. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to see this. I just wanted us to have proof, not pain." "It's both," I said. "But we needed it." I transferred everything to my phone, photos, messages, the video. Evidence that didn't exaggerate or distort. Evidence they couldn't talk their way out of. Emily wiped at her cheek quickly, as if embarrassed to let me see she'd been crying. "He replaced our family Thanksgiving with this," she said bitterly, "and he expected me to pretend I didn't notice." Her voice cracked in a way that hit me harder than the betrayal itself. I closed the tablet, locked the drawer again, and handed her the key. "We're going to make them face this," I said. "Both of them. No lies, no excuses." She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a fierce, shared resolve. "Together," she said. And in that quiet office, with the proof between us, and the truth rising like a tide we could finally see clearly, something shifted. This wasn't just payback anymore. This was reclamation, for both of us. The invitation arrived the next morning, printed neatly on one of those cheap cardstock templates Rick always pretended made him look refined. Post-Thanksgiving dinner, friends, neighbors, and loved ones welcome. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My wife placed the card on the table casually, like nothing in the world was wrong. "He invited us," she said, her tone bright, almost rehearsed. "I told him we'd go. It'll be good to socialize after all the tension lately." Tension. That was the word she chose. Not betrayal. Not guilt. Just a vague, soft little label to smooth over the cracks she'd caused. I forced a neutral expression. "Sure," I said. "Let's go." She smiled, relieved, because she thought she had successfully rewritten reality again. She had no idea what was coming. The night of the dinner, Emily met me outside before we walked in together. She looked different, stronger, composed, but with an undercurrent of nerves that showed in the way she smoothed her dress. It wasn't fancy, just simple and elegant, navy blue with sleeves that brushed her wrists. But it fit her in a way that made it impossible not to notice she wasn't the quiet kid I once knew. She was a woman stepping into her own fire. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I've been ready," I said. Inside, the house buzzed with forced cheer. People sipped wine, laughed too loudly, complimented the decorations. The air smelled like roasted vegetables and staged warmth. Rick stood near the kitchen, greeting guests with a self-satisfied grin that made my jaw clench. My wife stood beside him. She touched his arm when she laughed. She leaned in too close when he whispered something. If she felt any guilt at all, she hid it better than most performers on stage. Emily stiffened beside me. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, and for a moment I thought she might speak up right then, but she held herself back with visible effort. "Not yet," I murmured. We waited until dessert, until everyone was settled, until the room felt comfortable, full, secure in its ignorance. That's when Emily stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, loud enough to capture attention, but not so loud it seemed staged. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but she steadied it, each word gaining weight. "I need to say something." Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even the candles seemed to flicker less, as if the whole room leaned in. Rick's smile faltered. My wife froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Emily swallowed, her eyes blazing with something deeper than anger, hurt, betrayal, resolve. "This isn't easy," she said, "but the truth rarely is, and I can't pretend anymore." Rick took a step forward, fake concern plastered across his face. Sweetheart, maybe we should—" "No," she said sharply, her voice cracking through the room like a whip. "You don't get to interrupt me, not this time." He froze. Everyone stared. And then it was my turn. I picked up the remote I'd tucked into my jacket pocket. Emily had slipped it to me earlier. With one click, the TV mounted on the wall lit up, bright and sudden. The first photo filled the screen. My wife in Rick's kitchen, her hands on the counter, his hands too close to hers. Everyone gasped. Someone dropped their dessert plate. The sound of shattering ceramic echoed like punctuation. Another photo, and another. Then the video. My wife's laugh, Rick's voice. "We've got the whole evening to ourselves." My wife's silence, the kind that speaks louder than any confession. She shot to her feet, face draining of color. "Turn that off," she snapped. "This is private. This is wrong." "Wrong?" I said calmly. "Yes, it is." Rick looked around wildly, his confidence crumbling. "This is out of context. Everyone, listen, this isn't—" She was just helping. We were cooking. Emily stepped forward, her voice breaking but strong. "You replaced our family Thanksgiving with her," she said, pointing at my wife. "You pushed me out of my own home so you could pretend you had a new life, a new family, and you lied to everyone." Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "My father cheated on his partner," she continued, "and she cheated on her husband, and they spent Thanksgiving acting like they were the only people who mattered." Silence fell. Not the awkward kind, but the cold, sobering kind that comes when the truth settles too heavily to be ignored. My wife's breath shook. She glanced at me, searching my face for a softness I no longer had. "You shouldn't have done this," she whispered. "You violated my privacy." "You violated my marriage," I said gently. "We're even." Rick's partner, who'd been standing near the doorway the whole time, walked straight out without a word. Guests followed, murmuring, avoiding eye contact with the two of them as if betrayal could be contagious. And then it was just us. Me, Emily, Rick, my wife. The wreckage lay between us, truth laid bare, undeniable, irreversible. My wife opened her mouth, but no words came. Just a broken sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Rick looked at her, then at me, then at his daughter. But none of us cared what he thought anymore. The empire of lies had finally collapsed, and all it took was showing everyone exactly what they refused to see. The silence after the door slammed echoed longer than any shouting match could have. It lingered thick in the house, settling into every corner like dust. Rick stood frozen, his mouth open as if words might eventually find him. My wife looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders hunched, hands shaking, as if the truth on the screen had stripped away whatever armor she'd been hiding behind. Emily moved first. She stepped toward her father, eyes blazing, voice trembling with fury she'd spent years biting back. "I kept waiting for you to be better," she said. "Not perfect, just honest. I thought maybe, after everything, you'd finally treat me like a daughter, not an inconvenience." Rick swallowed hard. Emily, please. No, she snapped, her voice cracking but relentless. You don't get to act wounded now. You lied to your partner. You lied to me. And you lied to him. She pointed toward me, her fingers steady despite the emotion in her throat. You let him sit alone on Thanksgiving while you pretended this. She gestured at the dark TV. Was something noble or justified or romantic. My wife took a step toward her, tears forming. Emily, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Emily turned on her sharply. Then why did you smile in that video like nothing mattered? Why did you think it was okay to walk into someone else's home and take what wasn't yours? You didn't just hurt him. You hurt me. You hurt my family. My wife opened her mouth, but no sound came. She looked at me instead, but the pleading in her eyes found nothing left to hold on to. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was loud, and I was done with loud. I was simply done. You lied to me, I said quietly. Not just last night, not just a few weeks. You've been lying for months. You chose him. You chose secrecy. And then you chose to walk into this house and pretend you still had a place here. She wiped her eyes, breath shaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose everything. You didn't lose everything, I said. You handed it away. She flinched like I'd struck her. For a moment, she seemed to search for some version of me that might forgive her. But that man didn't exist anymore. Not because I hated her, but because I finally respected myself enough not to cling to someone who couldn't stand beside me. Rick rubbed his hands over his face, his voice hoarse. This is all being blown out of proportion. We're adults. Mistakes happen. Emily stared at him like she didn't recognize him. A mistake isn't something you repeat, she said. A mistake doesn't require passwords and secrecy and deleting messages. She lifted her chin. A mistake doesn't replace your daughter at Thanksgiving. That, more than anything, made him break. He reached for her, but she stepped back, her expression hardening into something final. Don't, she whispered. You made your choice. My wife looked between us, desperate now. Please, can we go home and talk about this? Just you and me? Without... We don't have a home, I said, gentle but firm. Not anymore. You chose a different one the moment you walked into his kitchen. Her lips trembled. So, what? You're giving up? No, I said. I'm letting go. Her breath hitched. She took a shaky step toward the door, hesitated as if waiting for me to stop her, tell her we could fix it, tell her there was hope. But I stayed still, and she realized, in that moment, she had truly lost. She walked out without another word. The door closed behind her with a finality that felt like a chapter ending itself. Rick stood there awkwardly, shifting his weight, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't mean for this to get out of hand, he mumbled. Things just happened. I stared at him, not with rage, but with profound exhaustion. You don't accidentally build a second life in your kitchen. He swallowed, shame flickering across his face before he turned away. Emily watched him quietly, something wounded and disappointed in her expression. For the first time, he seemed to notice how deeply he'd lost her. Not just her trust, but the very foundation of their relationship. His partner had already texted Emily moments earlier. I'm done. I'm packing my things. Everything crumbled in less than an hour, and he had only himself to blame. Emily stepped closer to me, her voice soft. I'm so sorry. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. She nodded, but her eyes shimmered slightly. It still hurts. It hurts knowing he chose her over me, over our family, over everything. I understood that better than she knew. The room around us felt hollow, like the remnants of a storm. But there was also a strange calm settling between us, a quiet understanding that we'd survived something neither of us deserved. We should go, she said finally. There's nothing left to say here. We walked out together. The cold air outside felt clean, almost sharp, like it was cutting away the last threads of denial that had held us back. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, and I instinctively moved closer, not touching, not assuming, just offering presence. And for the first time in days, the weight on my chest felt lighter. The truth had been ugly, brutal, long overdue, but it had set the stage for something neither of us expected, the chance to rebuild, not on lies or fear, but on honesty, even if we didn't yet know what that would look like. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet, not empty, not lonely, just peaceful. The kind of peace you don't realize you've been missing until the noise is finally gone. My wife moved out 2 days after the dinner party. She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She simply packed her things with the kind of dazed silence people wear when the world they built collapses faster than they ever imagined. She left a short note on the counter, an apology I didn't read. I didn't need her words anymore. Rick didn't fare much better. His partner was gone before the sun rose the next morning, and Emily told me he'd been dragging himself through the house like a ghost ever since. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. If anything, she grieved. Not for the relationship he ruined, but for the father she had hoped he could be. But she didn't fall apart. She grew. And strangely, we grew too. Together, in small ways neither of us expected. We didn't talk every day, but when we did, it felt natural, honest. There was no rush to define anything, no need to fill silence with forced conversation. Sometimes we walked around the neighborhood, both of us bundled against the December cold. Sometimes she'd text me photos of the awkward holiday decorations her dad had put up alone, joking that he arranged the lights like someone who'd given up halfway. But beneath the humor, there was something gentler, something rebuilding. And then, almost without thinking, I invited her over for dinner. Nothing fancy, I'd said. Just food, company, maybe something normal for once. She agreed before I had time to second-guess the invitation. The night she came over, the house was warm and lit softly, the kind of lighting that makes everything feel more real and more safe. I'd cooked simple dishes, roasted chicken, vegetables, a small pie. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced. But when she stepped inside, brushing cold air from her sleeves, she smiled like it meant more than either of us wanted to admit. "This smells amazing," she said, inhaling deeply. "Better than anything I've had since I got home." I shrugged modestly. I figured we both deserved a dinner that wasn't built on lies. She laughed, a real, unguarded sound, and something inside me relaxed. We ate slowly, talking about everything except the thing that tied us together. College stories, bad movies, her dreams, my quiet attempts at rebuilding parts of my life I'd neglected long before the betrayal. Somewhere between dessert and cleaning up, she grew quiet. Not sad, reflective. "You know," she said, gently swirling her fork across her plate, "Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. Not because of the food, but because it felt like a pause, a kind of reset, before everything got messy." I understood that more deeply than she knew. "Maybe," I said carefully, "it can still be a reset. Just a different kind." She looked up at me then, really looked. Eyes warm, soft, and searching. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in a way that suggested something was mending inside her. Something mending inside me, too. "We should make a new tradition," she said after a moment. "Not to replace anything. Just to start fresh. What did you have in mind?" She smiled. Not bold, not flirtatious, but hopeful. "Nothing complicated. Just eating together, talking, being honest, even if the world is falling apart around us." The simplicity of it hit me harder than anything else. We were two people who had been lied to so convincingly that truth itself felt like a gift. I raised my glass. "I can toast to that." She lifted hers, meeting mine in the center of the table. The soft clink echoed in the quiet kitchen, warm and small and perfect. "To new beginnings," she said. "To honesty," I replied. We drank, not as victims clinging to each other for comfort, but as two human beings choosing to rebuild from the ashes with dignity. The meal stretched long into the night, until the candles burned short, and the house settled into a gentle, contented silence. Before she left, she lingered in the doorway, pulling her coat close, as if she didn't quite want the moment to end. "Thank you," she murmured, "for dinner, for listening, for everything." "I should be thanking you," I said. "You reminded me what self-respect feels like." Her cheeks warmed slightly, and she looked down, smiling in a way that held something unspoken, but good, healing, real. "Well," she said softly, "you know where to find me if you ever want another dinner." I nodded. "And you know where to find me if you ever want another Thanksgiving." She paused, meeting my eyes with a bright, honest sincerity. "Next year," she said. "Let's make it ours. Not romantic, not rushed, not forced, just a promise, a choice." She stepped into the cold night with a small wave. I watched her walk across the yard, the crisp air carrying the quiet promise of something new. And for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't thinking about the betrayal behind me. I was thinking about the future I might actually want.